You're running late. Notifications are piling up. Someone cut you off in traffic, and your coffee tastes off. In that moment, it feels like the universe is messing with you personally. But take a breath. Step back. No, step way back. Picture your city from a plane window, then higher, from a satellite. See how small your frustrations look from there. And now ask yourself, what kind of ego thinks the cosmos is plotting against it? A bird's eye view isn't just distance. It's clarity. It's disarmament. From above, your ego, the anxious, reactive, image-obsessed creature, starts to dissolve. And in its place, something calmer begins to surface. You face a challenge today, letting go of the deeply rooted idea that the world owes you attention, explanation, or fairness. This is where Stoicism cuts deep. Its message is simple, but it doesn't flatter you. You are not the center of the world. You are part of it, yes, but not central, not special in the way your ego wishes you were. The Stoics had a name for this form of awareness, oikeiosis, the recognition that you belong to the whole, not the whole revolving around you. Your day is filled with slights. Someone forgets to text you back. A stranger makes a rude comment. A colleague doesn't acknowledge your extra effort. And each time, your ego rises in protest. How dare they, it hisses. Don't they know who I am? But if you step outside yourself, you can observe that voice from a distance. It shrinks. It loses its grip. Seneca once wrote, "What difference does it make how much it is, or what it is that offends you? The very fact that you feel it is an offense is itself the problem." You're not injured by the event. You're disturbed by the idea that you deserve different treatment. This is the first break in the ego's shell. Realizing that the universe operates without consulting your preferences. Your feelings may be vivid, your hardships real, but they're not central. The world doesn't arrange itself around your emotions. Think about Marcus Aurelius, Emperor of Rome, most powerful man in his world. Even he reminded himself daily, you are a tiny soul carrying a corpse. Not to be grim, but to be accurate. He knew how seductive it was to believe that power and position make you important. But from the perspective of nature, of time, he was dust like everyone else. Now imagine standing at the edge of a desert. You see your footprints in the sand. Then the wind begins to blow. A few minutes later, the prints are gone. That's how ego operates. It leaves marks and expects permanence, but the elements of the world, time, change, death, don't preserve our markings. You might believe this is depressing, but it isn't. It's liberating. The pressure to matter in some grandiose way slips off your shoulders. You stop competing with the universe for significance. You begin to participate in it instead. From a bird's eye view, your sense of specialness is replaced with a sense of connection. You aren't the most important person in the room, but neither are you an outsider. You are simply human. You are alive. You are here for now. The ego, left unchecked, turns life into performance. You become obsessed with who's noticing, who's admiring, who's offended. But when you look down from above, none of that chatter matters. What matters is, are you acting with integrity? Are you aligned with reason? Are you doing your part in the vast story you'll never fully see? That's where you start to feel free. Not because life becomes easier, but because your ego stops demanding that it should. There's a thought experiment some Stoics used. Imagine all your decisions being watched, not by others, but by your future self, or even by a divine reason, not to judge you, but to ask, was that necessary? Was that helpful? Was that true? The ego hates that kind of accountability. It prefers narrative over clarity. It says, they were wrong to treat me that way. Instead of asking, was my reaction useful? It says, I must prove my worth. Instead of asking, am I doing the work quietly, without applause? From above, your story flattens. Everyone has a story. Everyone feels misunderstood. You start to see people not as obstacles or ornaments, but as fellow participants. You stop narrating your life as a movie with you in the starring role. You stop confusing emotional importance with objective importance. You start to notice beauty without needing to possess it. You start to listen without planning your reply. You laugh more easily. You don't take slights personally because they aren't personal. How could they be in a world this big? And that's the paradox. The more you let go of trying to be important, the more clearly you see what actually matters. Not status, not control, but virtue, character, peace. The ego cannot survive at altitude. It cannot breathe up there, but your better self can. You feel something. Maybe it's irritation, maybe it's anxiety, and before you've even taken a breath to examine it, you react. You assume it's valid. You believe it must mean something. But just because you feel offended doesn't mean someone was offensive. Just because you feel threatened doesn't mean you are. And just because you feel certain doesn't mean you're right. That's the trap your ego sets. It teaches you to treat feelings like facts. But you're beginning to rise above that. Slowly, gently. You begin to see that emotions are not commands. They're signals, and not always accurate ones. From a bird's eye view, your feelings scatter like smoke. They still appear, but they don't dictate anymore. A core Stoic principle is this: it is not things themselves that disturb us, but our judgments about them. Epictetus said it plainly. He didn't dress it up. If something feels awful, you added the meaning to it. You interpreted it that way. The world gave you an event. Your mind gave it a story. Let's say someone criticizes your work. You feel insulted. But what actually happened? A person made a sound with their mouth. That sound entered your ears. Your brain decided what it meant. Your ego decided how to take it. You tell yourself they're being unfair, that you're under attack. But maybe, from a higher view, they were just a stressed person saying words. Maybe they had a point, maybe not. But your feelings didn't care about truth. They cared about ego preservation. Now imagine watching yourself from above. You're in a room, you hear the words, your face changes, a story builds. But from that higher perch, the entire process looks mechanical, predictable, even, not destiny, not doom, just reaction. This is where you start to gain something the Stoics cherished: assent, the ability to choose whether you accept an impression as true or false. It's your first line of defense against the emotional stampede. Marcus Aurelius practiced this daily. He'd write down impressions before they hardened into beliefs. If someone insulted him, he'd record, "He said this, I felt this, I chose not to believe it." That distance gave him power, not over others, but over himself. That's what you're building now. A kind of inner gatekeeper, not a robot, not cold, just someone who doesn't leap into the fire every time a match is struck. Remember a time you were angry and absolutely sure you were right. Think about how tightly you clung to that feeling. Then remember how days later, the anger faded and your certainty dissolved with it. If it was true, why did it expire? If it was real, why couldn't it last? This isn't to say emotions are worthless. They're messengers. They bring you information, but your ego promotes them to commanders. It obeys their orders without checking credentials. The Stoics believe the wise person listens to emotions without letting them take the wheel. You don't shut them out. You just question them, like a good doctor would. You say you're in pain. Let's find out what kind and why, and whether the pain points to anything real. Here's something humbling. You've been deeply wrong before and felt totally certain at the time. You've judged people harshly, only to realize you didn't understand their situation. You've worried over things that never happened. That's not weakness. That's being human. But the ego resists admitting it. It prefers to keep you angry rather than make you curious. Now imagine yourself standing on a beach, facing a huge wave. It's taller than you. It crashes with a roar. You feel panic rising, but instead of running, you look again. It's a projection, a film, just water, light, and sound. The panic was based on misreading the scene. That's what happens when you treat every emotion like a threat. You run from waves that can't even touch you. This is what Seneca meant when he said, "We suffer more in imagination than in reality." Most of your distress doesn't come from what is, but from what your ego assumes. It believes that discomfort equals danger. It assumes every emotional bump is a wall, but once you rise above it, even a little, you see the difference between discomfort and destruction, between a passing mood and a truth. You probably know someone who seems constantly offended. Every slight is an insult. Every disagreement is a betrayal. That's the ego in its rawest form, always on guard, always performing defense. But look closely. It's not strength, it's panic. Because deep down, the ego knows it's not grounded. It needs the illusion of certainty to survive. But when you start to observe your emotions instead of obeying them, something remarkable happens. You start to feel less trapped. You react more slowly. You breathe before speaking, and the world becomes less hostile. Not because it's changed, but because your lens has. From the bird's eye view, your ego doesn't vanish, but it quiets. It stops screaming for attention every time you feel discomfort. And in that space, wisdom grows. You stop taking everything personally. You stop needing to be right. You even stop needing to be understood because you understand yourself. And that's enough. You start to ask better questions. What belief is driving this feeling? Do I want to believe it? Is this useful? The ego hates these questions, but your better self thrives on them. You don't need to eliminate emotion. That's not what Stoicism asks. You just need to separate feeling from fact, to understand that pain is real, but your story about the pain is optional. And when you do that, you step into a kind of quiet strength, the kind that doesn't shout, the kind that doesn't need validation, the kind that sees a wave and waits. You've built something, maybe a career, a reputation, a body that turns heads, a profile that draws envy. You feel proud, rightly so. You've worked for it. But under that pride, there's a quiet tension, an unspoken fear that it could all be taken away. And that fear is not paranoia. It's realism. Because pride, once tied to fragile things, becomes fragile too. You start to climb. You earn recognition. Your name carries weight. And with every compliment, every approval, your ego swells. But what few people tell you is that pride built on status, on appearance, on applause is a trap. It's armor that cracks under pressure. The Stoics warned us about this constantly. Seneca, who was once the most powerful man in Rome after the emperor, knew what it felt like to be praised, envied, then hunted. One day he was guiding policy. The next, he was forced to take his own life under suspicion of treason. But long before his fall, he wrote, "No one has been able to pile up so much that a stronger man could not take more." It wasn't a warning against achievement. It was a reminder not to root your self-worth in things that vanish. Now picture your ego as a glass statue. You carry it carefully. Every victory adds a new polished edge. Every compliment, a layer of shine. But the higher you lift it, the more damage a fall could cause. And life, as you've learned, has no safety rails. From a bird's eye view, you watch people fight to protect their image. They lie to preserve a version of themselves they want others to see. They defend titles, cling to status, refuse to admit faults, not because they're evil, but because their pride cannot afford the crack. And you've done the same. You've defended things you didn't even believe in, just because letting go felt like losing. You've pretended to know more than you did, to be more than you were. That's not shameful. That's the ego doing what it does, inflating to survive. But here's the hard truth. The higher your pride builds itself on externals, the more unstable you become. The Stoics taught that your true worth must be placed in things no one can touch. Your judgment, your character, your ability to reason, your choices. These are the only possessions that survive upheaval. So you have a choice. Anchor your identity to something that cannot be shaken, or keep chasing fragile affirmations. Take Marcus Aurelius again, Emperor of Rome. He could have drowned in self-importance, but he wrote to himself as a student, not a king. "Don't waste the rest of your life worrying about what others think," he said. "It doesn't matter. You were made for something greater." He wasn't talking about destiny. He was talking about inner freedom, about a kind of strength that doesn't crack when someone doubts you, ignores you, forgets you. But your ego resists. It wants credit. It wants to be seen. It wants applause. And when applause fades, your pride feels like it's disappearing with it. Let's say you built a company or earned a name in your field, and then the winds shift. You get laid off. A scandal erupts. The market crashes. Suddenly, people look at you differently. And your ego panics because it built its temple on that admiration. The Stoics would ask, was the admiration ever yours to control? If you lose a job, you lose a role, not your ability to be honorable. If your name is dragged, you lose reputation, not your ability to act with reason. But the ego doesn't see this. It sees threat. It sees death. Seneca wrote about losing his wealth overnight, more than once. Each time he reminded himself, you may deprive me of wealth, but you cannot deprive me of the ability to be calm in its loss. That's the real measure of pride, not how loudly it celebrates, but how quietly it endures. And pride does not like quiet. It wants a spotlight. But from above, from that bird's eye view, you start to see how performative it all is, how exhausting, how desperate it looks when a person can't let go of being right, being respected, being seen. You stop asking, do they see how hard I've worked? And you start asking, am I living according to values that would matter even if no one saw? This shift breaks the cycle. You stop defending a version of yourself and start being yourself. You start to admire different things, not brilliance, but steadiness, not boldness, but humility. You begin to respect the person who can say, I was wrong, the person who doesn't flinch when criticized, the person who still gives effort when no one's watching. From this vantage point, ego starts to sound like noise, loud, repetitive, insecure noise. And in its place, you hear something quieter. You hear your inner voice, not the one that narrates your greatness, but the one that asks, who do I want to be, even if no one applauds? When you're no longer performing, you become harder to manipulate. Criticism doesn't pierce. Praise doesn't seduce. You find a kind of stillness, not a numbness, but a centeredness, a weight that holds you when storms arrive. You realize your ego is not your enemy. It's just scared. Scared that you'll disappear if you're not admired. But when you zoom out, you see the opposite is true. Your best self emerges when you no longer need to be admired. So you don't need to smash your pride. Just move it. From your achievements to your character. From your image to your integrity. From your name to your nature. The Stoics didn't ask you to disappear. They asked you to be real, to stop performing, to walk through the world with enough strength to say, I don't need to be celebrated. I just need to be good. You plan, you plot, you set goals, routines, expectations. You build schedules, teams, habits. You tell yourself you are taking control. And for a while, it works. The meeting starts on time. The market responds. The relationship grows. The future unfolds the way you pictured it. Until it doesn't, until your body betrays you, or someone breaks their promise, or the company folds, or the weather turns, or the child gets sick. Suddenly, all your control evaporates, and your ego doesn't know what to do with that. Because the ego needs to feel in charge. It can't handle randomness. It insists that success is earned and failure is a mistake. It believes life is a machine that just needs the right buttons pressed. But the Stoics would smile at that belief, not with cruelty, but with compassion. Because they saw the truth clearly. Control is mostly illusion, and the ego hates hearing that. You've probably had a moment like this. A project fails despite your perfect planning. A loved one walks away even though you did everything right, or you're forced to confront a diagnosis, a disaster, a death that wasn't part of your blueprint. You realize you can't will your way through it. You realize life doesn't follow scripts. And that moment, while painful, is also sacred, because it's where wisdom begins. The Stoics divided life into two realms, what you can control and what you can't. Your thoughts, your actions, your choices. That's yours. Everything else, not yours, not ever. This is the dichotomy of control, and it's the beating heart of Stoicism. Epictetus said, "Some things are up to us, and some things are not." He didn't mean this as a discouragement. He meant it as liberation, because when you stop claiming ownership over what was never yours, you stop being dragged by it. Take the weather. You can't control it, but you can choose your attitude when it rains. You can choose whether you curse the sky or carry an umbrella. The rain doesn't care either way, but your inner peace does. And this isn't just about nature. It's about people. You can't control what they think of you, how they behave, or what they choose to love or leave. But your ego tries. It twists itself into knots, manipulating, people-pleasing, over-explaining, all to maintain the illusion of control. From the bird's eye view, it looks exhausting. You see yourself trying to manage other people's opinions like a full-time job. You see the energy wasted in rehearsing conversations that never happen. You see how little you gain and how much you lose. Control is not power. Discernment is. Discernment means asking, is this within my reach? Can I act on this with reason? If not, then I let it be. Seneca told the story of a ship tossed by a storm. The sailor does everything he can. He tightens the sails, steadies the crew, watches the horizon, but he cannot command the wind. All he can do is respond well. If the ship sinks, the Stoic doesn't panic. He knows his job was to steer, not to guarantee survival. You may feel resistance to this. Your ego might whisper, "So what? Just do nothing? Let fate decide?" But that's not what Stoicism teaches. You do act fiercely, even, but you release the outcome. You don't attach your identity to success or failure. You pour yourself into the effort, then let go. That's real control, the kind that doesn't depend on circumstances. Think about how much of your stress comes from trying to predict, manage, or outsmart what's unpredictable. You wake up already defending yourself against a day you haven't lived yet. You try to force people to act right. You try to bend traffic, schedules, systems to your will. And when they don't cooperate, your ego takes it personally. But when you zoom out, when you look from above, you realize how little of this was ever yours to shape. You were never meant to control the whole world, only your role in it. And ironically, once you surrender that false control, you gain something stronger. Influence. Influence over your own mind, over your tone, your pace, your grace. You stop reacting to chaos with chaos. You stop blaming the tide for moving. You learn to surf it instead. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this, and you will find strength." He said this not from a mountaintop, but from battlefields, from sleepless nights, from grief. His empire was crumbling, but inside, he was calm. Why? Because he stopped expecting order from the outside. He built it within. You might still crave control. That's human. But now you catch yourself. You feel the grasping. You hear the ego whisper, "Fix it. Fix them. Fix everything." And you smile gently. You say, "That's not my job." Your job is to show up with reason, with effort, with integrity. That's it. You're not passive. You're focused. You do what's yours. You release what's not. You don't waste time writing the wind a letter demanding it change direction. Instead, you learn how to sail. You imagine the worst. You picture rejection, humiliation, disaster. You run the scenes in your head like a director obsessed with a tragic ending. Your body tenses, your sleep shortens, your mood shifts. And the funny thing is, none of it has happened yet, but your ego is already in survival mode. That's fear, not just a feeling, but a forecast. The ego doesn't wait for evidence. It builds a defense around possibility. But from a bird's eye view, your imagined disasters start to look like shadows, real enough to scare you, but insubstantial once the light hits them. From that height, you see how often fear is just your ego trying to stay in control. It invents futures to protect you from being surprised. And in doing so, It locks you in an endless rehearsal of pain. The Stoics saw this tendency in all of us. They knew that fear isn't about what is, but what might be. And the key was never to eliminate fear, but to examine it, to shrink it down to its real size. Marcus Aurelius often reminded himself that most fears are just mental pictures. You have the power, he wrote, to strip away many superfluous troubles, for they exist only in your opinion. Let's say you fear losing your job. The ego doesn't stop at the event. It spirals. It says, if I lose this job, I lose income. If I lose income, I lose my home. If I lose my home, I'm nothing. That's not fear of job loss. That's fear of identity collapse. The ego has fused your worth to a role, a title, a paycheck. Zoom out. Is losing a job unpleasant? Yes. Is it a death sentence? No. But the ego doesn't care about proportions. It cares about survival. So it inflates. It dramatizes. It invents. Seneca wrote about this in one of his most memorable letters. He described spending days preparing for poverty, not because he expected it, but because he wanted to feel it. He wore rough clothes, ate plain food, slept on the floor. Why? Because he knew that fear thrives in abstraction. But when you look fear in the face, it often has less bite than you imagined. He called this practice premeditatio malorum, the premeditation of adversity. It wasn't pessimism. It was a way to disarm fear by meeting it voluntarily, by saying, let me taste it now, so I'm not broken by it later. And from that, something strange happens. Freedom. Because the worst thing you fear becomes familiar. And what's familiar stops controlling you. Think of your fears right now. Maybe it's aging, failure, being alone. Maybe it's embarrassment, saying the wrong thing in a meeting, being seen as incompetent. These aren't irrational fears. They're human. But look closely. Each one is built on a story your ego tells. If I age, I lose value. If I fail, I lose identity. If I'm alone, I am unloved. If I'm embarrassed, I lose standing. And none of these are rooted in fact. They're rooted in the ego's obsession with status, permanence, and control. But again, take the bird's eye view. You age, and so does everyone else. You fail, and so has everyone great. You're alone, and still breathing, still whole. You're embarrassed, and the world moves on. Fear needs tight spaces to survive. In a narrow room, it echoes, it grows. But open the windows, step outside, and suddenly it has nowhere to hide. You begin to notice how much of your fear is performative. You say you're afraid of failure, but maybe you're more afraid of looking like a failure. You say you fear discomfort, but what you really fear is being seen struggling. That's ego. Fear, examined through the Stoic lens, becomes smaller, not because life gets safer, but because your identity no longer depends on constant reassurance. Imagine watching your fears as if they were scenes in a silent film. No soundtrack, no dialogue, just images, you being criticized, you walking away from a toxic relationship, you being passed over, you making a mistake. When the music is stripped away, you notice something. The image isn't terrifying. What was terrifying was your mind's narration, the commentary, the ego's voice saying, this is unacceptable. This is shameful. This must never happen. But now you're the viewer, not the victim, and that changes everything. You stop trying to outrun fear. You turn toward it. You ask, what are you really trying to protect? The answer is usually the ego's favorite thing, image. And you no longer need to protect that at all costs. So what happens when you stop fearing fear? You become bolder, not reckless, but calm. You make decisions based on values, not avoidance. You say the true thing even if it's awkward. You try the hard thing even if you might fail. You let go of outcomes and focus on effort. You become someone your past self would have admired. And when fear returns, as it will, you greet it like an old friend. You ask it questions, you listen, then you decide, is this fear offering useful information or is it just noise? You thank it either way. Then you move, because you're no longer ruled by ego's projections. You're guided by reason. You see someone's life online, their polished routine, their success, their perfectly filtered joy, and something stirs in you. Not admiration, not inspiration, something colder, envy, that quiet voice whispering, why not me? You don't want to feel it, but you do. It gnaws at your confidence. It tells you you're behind. You're less, you're missing something. And that voice, let's call it what it is your ego in comparison mode. Envy doesn't happen in a vacuum. It happens in tight spaces, crowded timelines, closed rooms. You feel envy when you measure yourself next to someone else's highlight reel. You feel it when the focus is small, local, zoomed in. But from a bird's eye view, envy collapses. Because from high above, you see complexity. You see that everyone is carrying something unseen, that no life is perfect, that behind every impressive image is a human being making trade-offs, feeling doubt, facing entropy. And you remember everyone suffers, even the people you envy. Epictetus said, don't set your heart on things that are not your own. What did he mean? He meant that chasing someone else's path, someone else's talents, someone else's fate, it's a betrayal of your own. You weren't designed to be a copy. You were given a role. Play it well. Envy shrinks when you reclaim your lane. Imagine you're watching a street from above. A crowd flows through it. One person walks faster. Another stumbles. A third turns down an alley. And from your vantage point, no one path looks better. They just look different. You stop assuming that speed means direction. You stop assuming that style means success. You stop pretending that anyone has it all. The ego loves to assume. It sees the entrepreneur's wealth, but not their 3M, panic. It sees the athlete's triumph, but not their quiet injuries. It sees the couple's curated photos, but not their silences. The ego sees surface and calls it the whole story. But the view from above shows you the truth. Comparison is fiction dressed as logic. You've felt this before. Resentment for someone's win. A bitterness that isn't about them, but about your reflection in their shadow. And when you look closely, that bitterness isn't moral. It's mathematical. Your ego is doing accounting, keeping score, measuring your worth by someone else's numbers. But life is not a ledger. You're not behind. You're on your own road. And the only person you're meant to surpass is who you were yesterday. Now here's the strange thing about envy. It often targets what you once wanted, not what you truly need. Your ego will envy money even if you're not driven by wealth. It will envy beauty even if you don't value appearance. It just wants status, and it doesn't care what kind. From above, you see how hollow this is. You remember Musonius Rufus, the Stoic teacher who believed virtue was the only true wealth. He taught his students in open fields, often barefoot, without possessions. He believed that to want what another person has is to surrender your peace, because the more you crave what isn't yours, the more you lose what is. So how do you break the spell? You start by noticing it. You admit envy when it shows up. You say, there you are. Thank you for revealing what I think I lack. Then you ask, is this thing I envy truly part of a life I admire? Or is it just shiny? You remember that everyone pays for their life with time, effort, stress, trade-offs. You ask yourself if you're willing to make those same payments. If the answer is no, then you weren't envying their life. You were envying their image. The Stoics taught that contentment comes from returning to what's real, to your breath, your principles, your choices, your actions. That's all that's ever been in your hands. It may feel like others are racing ahead, but what race are they running? And what do they lose to run it? You might look at someone and think, they've made it, but zoom out. 5 years from now, their peak may be gone. 10 years, forgotten. 15, replaced. Envy is a snapshot of a story you don't know the ending of. And while you're watching their scene, your own life goes unwritten. From the bird's eye view, the path that looked superior now looks simply different. The struggle that looked pathetic now looks courageous. The success that looked effortless now looks heavy. And you realize something deeper. Envy is not just about them. It's a refusal to accept you. It's a way of saying, my life, as it is not enough, but it is. If you choose to see it that way, that doesn't mean complacency. It means grounding. You still grow. You still improve, but not from deficit, from design. You're not broken. You're in progress. The more you accept your own lane, the less you obsess over others. You stop scrolling for proof that you matter. You start building quietly, steadily, on your own terms. And when you see someone else thrive, you practice a different habit, not envy, but sympathia. The Stoic idea that we are all part of one whole, one body. Their win doesn't threaten you. It belongs to us. You're not competing, you're contributing. So the next time envy bites, pause, rise above it, look down gently at the stage your ego is built, then walk off it. You've got your own path to walk, and it's wide enough for peace. You want to be remembered. You want your work to matter. You want to leave something behind that proves you existed, that you weren't just passing through, invisible. Your ego feeds on legacy. It tells you to chase influence, to build your name, to carve your initials into the world before time washes it clean. You imagine a future where people speak of you with respect, where your picture hangs in offices, where your books are still read, your words still quoted, and that vision feels comforting. But step back, no, rise up. From the bird's eye view, even the most honored names blur, statues crumble, achievements get revised, awards gather dust. The crowds that once applauded vanish, replaced by people with no memory of your triumphs. The future, you realize, forgets. Marcus Aurelius understood this better than most. He was emperor of the largest empire on earth, and yet he reminded himself, all is ephemeral, fame and the famous as well. He listed names of great men from Rome's past, all of them now forgotten in his time. And if they were forgotten, what was he expecting? It wasn't self-pity, it was clarity. He wasn't saying nothing matters, he was saying, don't tie your worth to what others will remember, because the truth is, they won't. Not for long. And the ego can't stand this. The ego thrives on being seen. It wants to echo after death. But from above, this desire for permanence starts to look absurd. The galaxy isn't keeping score. History doesn't preserve with fairness. And most people who change the world never get named. Think about it. How many names do you know from 200 years ago? A few dozen, maybe out of billions. And how many will remember your name 200 years from now? That's not a defeat. That's a liberation. Because once you stop working for remembrance, you can start working for rightness. Not for fame, but for purpose. Not for applause, but for alignment. Seneca put it like this: what matters is not how long the flame burns, but how brightly. You may be forgotten, but that doesn't erase what you were. It only erases the image. The substance remains. The world is filled with nameless heroes, people who mentored quietly, who served with integrity, who acted justly without needing a statue. They're not remembered, but they lived well. That was enough. And when you rise above the noise, you start to see how much energy is wasted trying to be seen. How many hours are spent crafting an image, branding a life, packaging success? The ego wants a legacy, but not a real one, a curated one. But your real legacy is not your name. It's your effect. It's how your choices ripple through the lives you touch, how your steadiness becomes someone else's shelter, how your courage gives someone else permission to speak. You may never know it. You may never be credited for it, but it's real. The Stoics asked you to focus on what you control, and memory is not one of those things. Your actions are, so you act well now, not so they remember later, but because it's right now. Let's say you write a book, and it's never read again after you die. Was it worthless? Or did it offer value to a handful of people in a specific time when they needed it? Let's say you raise a child with care and wisdom. That child grows up and helps others. Who gets the credit? You? Them? The system? Does it matter? The ego wants to be the author of all things. The view from above says, just be part of the page. Even great names fade. Think of towering figures, emperors, inventors, generals. How many of them are misremembered, reduced to trivia, sometimes even despised for things we understand differently now? Fame is not truth. Legacy is not justice. It's narrative, and narratives shift. So what's the alternative? Be a good person, do good work, let it go. Don't aim to be remembered, aim to be useful. There's a kind of peace that settles in when you accept this. You stop performing, you stop positioning, you start creating for the sake of truth. You start showing up with kindness no one will write down. You start living in the present, not auditioning for the future. And then, strangely, you do become memorable, not in the history books, but in people's hearts, in quiet ways. The way a teacher changed your life, the way a friend showed up during grief, the way someone listened without needing credit. None of them needed to be remembered forever. They needed only to be present, fully. So the next time your ego whispers that your work doesn't matter unless it lasts, rise above that. Ask, what if it mattered deeply and then was gone? Would it still be worth doing? If the answer is yes, then your ego has lost its grip. And you've begun to live. You walk into a room, you feel it instantly, the self-consciousness, the invisible eyes. You imagine everyone scanning you, judging your clothes, your posture, your energy. You adjust, you shrink or perform. Your mind races with imagined commentary. Do I look okay? Did I sound stupid? Are they laughing at me? And the most humbling truth is this: most people aren't thinking about you. They're thinking about themselves. Their minds are flooded with their own worries, their own flaws, their own images to maintain. They're too busy performing their own roles to memorize yours. And from the bird's eye view, this is obvious. You zoom out and see hundreds, thousands, millions of people all wrapped in their own little storms of self-awareness. The ego doesn't believe this. The ego wants to believe you're always being observed, that your mistakes are headlines, that your reputation lives permanently in others' minds. But the Stoics, calmly, wisely, say otherwise. Epictetus once advised, if you want to improve, be content to be thought foolish and stupid. Let that settle. Not just okay with being misunderstood, content, because what you lose in image, you gain in integrity. Here's the trick your ego plays. It says your identity is at the mercy of public opinion, that if people misunderstand you, disapprove of you, or forget you, then you must not matter. So you live reactively, constantly managing impressions, adjusting your tone, smoothing your edges to be more acceptable. But from above, it's exhausting to watch, because no amount of control guarantees respect, no amount of likability guarantees safety, and most of the time, the audience isn't even paying attention. You fear judgment, but whose judgment? Exactly. A stranger on the train? A manager you'll never work with again? A group of people so focused on themselves they won't remember what you said 5 minutes later? Think of Marcus Aurelius, emperor of Rome, surrounded by courtiers and critics. He wrote, I do not trouble myself about the opinion of those who do not know what is good or bad. He meant this not with arrogance, but with clarity. If they don't know your values, why should their judgment shape your life? This is the discipline of assent, another Stoic cornerstone. You don't have to accept every thought that enters your mind. Just because you imagine being judged doesn't mean you are. Just because you feel exposed doesn't mean you're visible. Assent means choosing which impressions are worth believing. Imagine you're at a party. You tell a story, and someone looks away. Instantly, your ego whispers, they're bored. I'm boring. But maybe they just got a text. Maybe they're tired. Maybe they're anxious themselves. The event isn't the issue. It's your interpretation. Zoom out again. Watch the room from the ceiling. You'll see a dozen people lost in their own insecurities. Someone wonders if their joke offended. Someone else regrets their outfit. Another person replays something they said wrong at lunch. No one is truly present. Everyone's busy worrying about being seen. And you're finally starting to let go of that game. It's not about rejecting all feedback. Stoicism doesn't ask you to become numb or indifferent. It asks you to root your self-assessment in reason, not reaction, to know yourself so well that public misunderstanding doesn't derail you. Think back to a time someone misunderstood you, thought you were cold when you were just quiet, or arrogant when you were shy. Your ego burned to correct them. You wanted to be seen accurately, but the Stoics would ask, why? Why does it matter if they see you clearly? What matters is that you see yourself clearly. And once you do, external validation becomes optional. You find yourself listening more and defending less, speaking plainly instead of performing cleverness. You post without obsessing over responses. You enter rooms without preemptively shrinking or expanding yourself. You just are, grounded, undistracted. When someone judges you unfairly, you say, that's their judgment, not my reality. When someone praises you, you say, that's their opinion, not my worth. And when you catch yourself trying to impress, you pause and ask, for whom and why? This is a freedom your ego never imagined. Freedom from surveillance, real or imagined. From the need to be impressive, from the constant emotional bookkeeping of, did they like me? You learn to respect your inner scorecard more than the crowd's applause. And here's the irony. When you stop trying to be noticed, people trust you more. When you stop managing their perception, you become easier to understand. When you stop needing to be liked, you become likable in a different, deeper way. There's a kind of person who moves through the world without flinching under the spotlight because they've stopped performing. And that person is you, becoming. So when the ego whispers, they're watching you. Let it speak. Then smile and return to what matters. Am I acting with reason? Am I in alignment with my values? Am I treating this moment with presence? Because when you're grounded in that, you'll no longer fear being misjudged. You'll realize most people weren't judging at all. They were too busy worrying about how you saw them. You've been wrong before, deeply, confidently wrong. You've believed things that didn't hold up. You've spoken too soon, defended bad ideas, misread people, doubled down when you should have backed off. And in each case, your ego was there, assuring you that you were right, that certainty was strength. But now, from above, you start to see how shaky that certainty really was. From a bird's eye view, your past stumbles don't look shameful. They look human. You watch yourself learning in real time. You watch yourself growing, not falling. The very missteps you once hid become the evidence that you're still evolving. That's the perspective your ego resists. Because to the ego, being wrong is a threat to identity. It says, if I admit error, I admit weakness. But the Stoics saw it differently. They believed that intellectual humility is not weakness. It's a superpower. Socrates, who laid the groundwork for Stoic thought, claimed to know only one thing, that he knew nothing, and he meant it. That posture wasn't a trick. It was a practice, a constant clearing of assumptions, a reminder that wisdom doesn't cling, it questions. You've seen what it looks like when someone can't admit they're wrong, the digging in, the redirection, the defensiveness. But when you rise above, you see what's actually happening. They're not protecting truth. They're protecting ego. You've done it too. You've clung to ideas because they were yours. You've pushed back against new information because it felt threatening. You've dismissed feedback not because it was unhelpful, but because it came too close. And here's the humbling part. Most of the time, the things we defend don't matter, not deeply, not ethically. We argue over timing, phrasing, tone, while the real opportunity to learn and refine slips by. Marcus Aurelius warned himself against this. If someone can prove me wrong, he wrote, and show me my mistake in any thought or action, I will gladly change. For the truth is what I seek, and no one was ever harmed by the truth. The ego flinches at that, but the wiser part of you knows it's better to adjust than to persist in error. Better to bend toward truth than to stand rigid in false certainty. There's a kind of strength in saying, I don't know. There's power in saying, I was wrong. Not as a performance, not as false humility, but as a genuine recognition. My mind is still under construction. Think about someone whose mind you admire, not because they're always right, but because they listen well, they revise, they stay curious, their thoughts feel alive, not frozen. That's who you're becoming, not a know-it-all, but a learn-it-all. And from above, you see how learning happens, not in moments of dominance, but in moments of doubt. Doubt invites exploration. Certainty shuts the door. Now look back on a belief you've changed. Maybe something about politics, or relationships, or yourself. At the time, the change felt uncomfortable, even embarrassing. But now, that pivot was the growth. That admission was the upgrade. You no longer need to be consistent. You need to be coherent, not locked into yesterday's views, but aligned with today's truth. And if today's truth requires revising yesterday's stance, then good. That means you're paying attention. Epictetus urged his students to be more concerned with acting rightly than appearing right. And when your ego lets go of its grip, you find that desire fading, the desire to win debates, to have the final word, to never be seen learning in public. Instead, you develop a new instinct, to pause, to reflect, to revise out loud. That's not weakness, that's mastery. And when someone challenges you, whether kindly or harshly, you no longer see it as an attack. You see it as a test. Can I learn from this? Can I let this sharpen me? The bird's eye view gives you emotional space. You watch your own reaction rise. Tight chest, defensiveness, the reflex to argue. But instead of obeying, you observe. And then you ask, am I protecting truth or protecting pride? And more often than not, it's pride. But that's okay. The point isn't to eliminate ego. It's to make sure it doesn't lead. You also begin to notice that being wrong in front of others isn't fatal. It's forgivable. And it builds trust because people recognize honesty when they see it. They know what it means when someone says, I hadn't considered that, or let me think more, or I may have gotten that wrong. That humility disarms tension. It creates openness, and it invites others to be honest and us too. From above, you realize all of us are stumbling forward, correcting as we go. No one has a finished map. No one gets every step right. The people who grow are the ones who notice the missteps sooner and adjust faster, not the ones who pretend they never slip. So you let go of the need to appear certain. You become more interested in learning than in being impressive. You value accuracy over ego safety. And slowly, your mind becomes more spacious. Your relationships become less defensive. Your inner life becomes less tense. You stop needing to be the smartest. You start wanting to be the most honest. And in that honesty, you discover a new kind of wisdom, the kind that listens, the kind that doesn't flinch when corrected, the kind that understands that being wrong is not the end of dignity. It's the beginning of real clarity. You've been cast in roles all your life: child, student, employee, friend, leader, caregiver, rebel, performer. Each one brings expectations. You adjust, you learn the lines, you play the part, and slowly, without realizing it, your ego starts to confuse the role with who you are. But from above, you can see the costume. The actor is not the character, and you are not your role. You are the one playing it. This is one of the most radical insights Stoicism offers. Not that roles are bad, but that you must wear them lightly, that you must know where the stage ends and where you begin. Epictetus described it perfectly. He said, remember that you are an actor in a play, which is as the playwright wants it to be, short or long, tragic or comic. Your job is to act your part well. It's not a rejection of life's duties. It's a reframing. You are not in control of the entire script, only of how you show up on stage. You may be assigned a supporting role. You may be cast as a leader. Either way, the goal is the same. Act with virtue, act with clarity, act well. Now think about the last time you felt insulted, not as a person, but as a role. Maybe as a parent, when your advice was ignored, or as a professional, when your work was overlooked. Maybe someone questioned your intelligence, or your strength, or your identity. The pain didn't come from the insult itself. It came from your ego clinging to the role. The ego says, I must be respected in this role. I must be taken seriously. I must win this argument to maintain my standing. But when you zoom out, the fixation loosens. You start to see that roles are situational, temporary, and often arbitrary. Today's boss is tomorrow's retiree. Today's star is tomorrow's footnote. Roles shift. What remains is the quality of your character. That's what the Stoics cared about. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, you are a citizen of the universe, not just a Roman, not just an emperor. Those roles would pass. The self underneath, the rational, observing, moral self, was what mattered. You feel it in your own life. When you tie your identity to a role, every challenge to that role feels personal. If you're the fixer, then you feel lost when you can't solve something. If you're the strong one, you resist rest and vulnerability. If you're the achiever, you collapse when the results dry up. But you are not those titles. You are the one who plays them, as needed, for as long as they serve good. There's dignity in this, a kind of quiet resilience, because when the role is no longer useful, when the company changes, or the children grow, or the relationship ends, you don't lose yourself. You simply bow, exit that scene, and wait for the next call. And here's something else. The ego craves lead roles. It wants to be admired. It wants control of the script. But from the bird's eye view, you see how vital every part is. The nurse, the janitor, the neighbor, the stranger who smiled at the right moment. None of these roles are glamorous, but they shape lives, often more than the ones wearing crowns. Seneca taught that philosophy doesn't care about titles. It cares about conduct. You could be rich or poor, powerful or unknown. What matters is how you respond to the role you've been given. This doesn't mean you avoid ambition. It means your ambition is inward-facing. You don't try to become someone in particular. You try to become good, and if a higher role comes, one with more eyes, more weight, you don't get lost in it. You remember who you are behind the curtain. You can always tell when someone is fused to their role. They can't take criticism. They can't laugh at themselves. They overreact when questioned, because it's not just feedback, it's an existential threat. But now, you're learning to unhook. You start to see your titles as tools, not identities. You stop saying, I am a leader, and start saying, I am a person who leads when needed. You stop saying, I am a failure, and start saying, I faced something hard and learned. The ego hates this softening of boundaries. It wants sharp labels. But your wiser self knows that labels limit. They trap you in stories that don't evolve. So you hold your roles lightly. You show up fully. You don't fake modesty, but you also don't build prisons out of personas. And when people misunderstand you, expect more, or less, or something else entirely, you don't panic. You remember that their image of your role is theirs. You're not responsible for how they cast you in their play. You stay in your own script. You speak from your own clarity. You act from your own principles. And when the scene ends, you take a breath, walk off stage, and wait calmly, gratefully, for what life calls next. Because you are not your role. You are the one who plays it well. You love comfort. Everyone does. A soft bed, a warm drink, a clean room, a routine that flows without friction. Comfort feels like control. It's the ego's reward for working hard, for managing things well, for getting life to behave. And there's nothing wrong with comfort until it becomes your cage. Because comfort, once clung to, starts to erode your edge. It tells you you're safe when you're just still. It tells you you're okay when you're just numb. It whispers that peace means softness, not strength. That's when comfort begins to cripple you. From the bird's eye view, this shift is obvious. You watch people, well-fed, well-paid, well-housed, moving through life like ghosts, detached from hardship, dulled by ease, and you've felt it in yourself. The resistance to discomfort, the shrinking from challenge, the slow, creeping fear of anything that threatens your carefully maintained stability. But the Stoics didn't just tolerate discomfort, they practiced it. Seneca would deliberately sleep on the floor. He would eat the blandest food. He would wear rough clothes. And he'd ask himself, is this what I feared? Not because he was trying to suffer, but because he was testing his grip. How tightly had he started clinging to the unnecessary? The answer sometimes was more than he realized. The ego wants to be protected. It wants to avoid embarrassment, effort, tension. It wants the path of least resistance until that path turns to mud and you don't remember how to walk through it. Comfort teaches you to flinch. Discomfort teaches you to endure. And discomfort doesn't have to mean crisis. It can be as small as waking earlier than you want, as quiet as holding your tongue in a moment of heat, as inconvenient as saying no when yes would please. These moments, repeated, become a kind of training, a quiet conditioning of the soul. You start to realize that strength doesn't come from what you avoid, but from what you can withstand. And from above, you begin to see how short-sighted the ego's obsession with comfort really is. Imagine two people on parallel roads. One avoids discomfort at every turn, stays indoors, avoids tough conversations, lets others decide. They feel safe, but shrink over time. The other embraces discomfort, sweats, stumbles, speaks the hard truth. They get cut, but grow. Which one is freer? Which one is alive? Epictetus told his students, difficulties are things that show a person who they are, not punishments, not misfortunes, opportunities to reveal your training, to show whether your principles are theory or practice. Your ego doesn't want that test. It wants guarantees. It wants insurance against embarrassment, against rejection, against pain. But comfort becomes a contract. Stay in the circle, and the world won't press you too hard until it does. And then, if you haven't trained, you break. You've probably felt it. Those moments when life hit you harder than you were ready for. The loss, the job gone, the friend who left, the plan that dissolved. Suddenly, your rituals weren't enough. Your comforts didn't protect you. That's not failure. That's feedback. That's life asking, have you rehearsed this moment before it arrived? And if you haven't, now you know. And you start. You do what the Stoics called voluntary discomfort. You let go of the blanket. You walk in the rain. You go without something small, sugar, screens, validation, for a little while, not to punish yourself, to remember that you're not dependent, that your peace isn't built on cushions. You have a spine. You do the uncomfortable thing. You speak up in the meeting. You tell someone the truth. You admit when you're scared, and slowly, your courage returns, not as bravado, but as quiet readiness. From above, the comfort-obsessed life looks strangely vulnerable because it hasn't prepared for wind, it hasn't practiced hunger, it hasn't remembered how to be small and still whole. You begin to shift your admiration, not for the person with ease, but for the one with grit, not for the person who glides, but for the one who returns after falling, the one who holds grace in pain, the one who doesn't flinch when the temperature drops. That's a kind of wealth your ego can't measure. Musonius Rufus, a Stoic teacher often overlooked, believed physical hardship trained the mind, that we become more ethical, more stable, when we resist indulgence. He called it exercising the soul through the body. You push through tired muscles to remind your character. We do not run from effort. And over time, you crave less luxury, not because you don't enjoy it, but because you don't need it. That's the goal, to enjoy warmth but not be destroyed by cold, to savor praise but not depend on it, to welcome comfort but not be owned by it. From the bird's eye view, you don't look fragile anymore. You look prepared. The wind picks up, the ground shifts, and you walk calmly and without drama, because you've trained, because your strength wasn't handed to you. It was carved, moment by moment, from discomfort freely chosen. You tell yourself your story, again and again. I'm the one who never got the support. I'm the one who's always fighting uphill. I'm the one who can't catch a break. I'm the one who has to prove myself. And maybe all those things have been true. At some point, maybe you carry real pain, real struggle. Your ego has woven it all into a narrative, a personal mythology where you are the center, and the world reacts to you. Every insult confirms the script. Every win redeems it. But now, rise up. See your life from the sky. The lines of your story begin to blur, not because they don't matter, but because they're one thread in a vast tapestry. You are not the story. You are a story, one of billions. And far from diminishing you, that realization opens something deeper: humility, connection, freedom. The Stoics called this perspective cosmopolitanism, the idea that you are not a citizen of one role, one family, one nation, but a citizen of the universe. You belong to a wider world. Your suffering is not isolated. Your victories are not singular. You are part of a shared human condition. This doesn't erase your individuality. It enriches it. It tells you you are not alone, not in joy, not in loss. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself, you are a little soul carrying a corpse, and you inhabit a moment in time. But he didn't despair at this. He used it to see clearly. He realized that being small doesn't make you insignificant. It makes you real. When you identify too much with your own story, everything becomes personal. The rude driver isn't just impatient, he's disrespecting you. The late email isn't just poor time management, it's proof they don't value you. The rejection isn't a mismatch, it's evidence that you're not enough. But from the bird's eye view, these events lose their sting. They stop revolving around you. They become patterns in a vast human drama, messy, overlapping, unpredictable. And now you can breathe. Because you realize that not everything has to mean something about you. Imagine a planet with billions of little lights, each one a person, thinking, planning, struggling, hoping. Your light flickers, strong one day, dim the next, but so do all the others. You don't need to outshine anyone. You just need to shine steadily. Your ego says, make your story exceptional. The Stoics say, make your story honest. And honesty means accepting that your narrative isn't the only one, that the person who interrupted you has their own stresses, that the person who didn't understand you carries their own grief, that the person who succeeded where you failed had different variables, not better virtue. You stop assigning personal weight to impersonal events. You stop mistaking proximity for relevance. You stop narrating every interaction like a novel where you are the protagonist. And slowly, your story softens. It expands. It begins to include others, not as background characters, but as fellow travelers. You feel less need to defend your arc. You feel more freedom to edit your lines. You begin to think less about how you're seen and more about how you're useful. That shift away from self-focus and towards shared humanity is what the Stoics meant by belonging to nature. Seneca once said, no one can live happily who has regard to himself alone and transforms everything into a question of his own utility. To live well, you must stretch outward. You must recognize that your life only finds shape through relationship. And when you zoom out, you see that suffering, too, connects us. You're not the only one who's lost something precious. You're not the only one who wakes with dread. You're not the only one who feels unseen, unheard, unfinished. And in seeing that, your pain becomes less isolating. You start to ask different questions. Not why is this happening to me? But what can I learn from this that might help someone else? Not how do I prove I'm worth something, but how can I live in a way that benefits more than just me? The ego tightens. The perspective loosens. And with looseness comes relief. Not apathy, not detachment, but spaciousness. You can be serious about your life without believing it's the only life that matters. You can be diligent with your duties without believing they define your whole worth. You can let go of your special story and discover something deeper, your shared story. The one that says, I am human, I am flawed, I am learning, I am here briefly, and I will try to be useful while I can. When you see your story as one of billions, your ego cannot dominate the frame, but your compassion grows, your patience grows, your curiosity grows, and most of all, your peace grows. Because you stop needing to be exceptional, and you start wanting to be whole, You lose something, a job, a person, a dream, and your first instinct is protest. Why now? Why me? This wasn't supposed to happen. Your ego reacts like a wound has opened. It flails, searching for someone to blame, a reason to fight. It treats loss like betrayal. But from above, loss looks different. You rise, you watch it all unfold without sound, just movements, cycles, shifts. You see that everything eventually changes form. Everything passes, not because something went wrong, but because that's the rhythm of nature. And your ego, it doesn't like rhythm. It wants possession. The Stoics reminded us again and again. Loss is not theft, it's return. What you have is not yours in the ultimate sense. You borrow your health, you borrow your relationships, you borrow your role, your breath, your time. You don't own any of it. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "Receive without pride, let go without attachment." Not because he was cold, because he understood harmony. He knew that to fight the natural flow is to exhaust yourself against the current. You felt that exhaustion in the bargaining stage, in the refusal to let go, in the thousand ways your ego tried to resurrect what was gone. But from the bird's eye view, you begin to see what the Stoics saw. Loss is not the end of order. It's part of it. There's no escaping grief, but there is a way to move through it that doesn't destroy you. The Stoics called this alignment with nature, capital N, not just trees and rivers, but the underlying logic of life, the way everything has a season, the way fire consumes, the way fruit ripens and rots, the way stars burn out. They didn't deny emotion, they honored it, but they challenged you to see beyond it. To ask, is this really misfortune or just movement? Let's say someone dies, you ache. Of course, you cry, you feel hollow, but over time you recognize the fact of their death is not unnatural. It's unbearable only because your ego wanted permanence. Or you lose your job, your plans collapse, your title evaporates. But again, that was never promised. Nothing about that outcome violates reality. It only violates your preference. And that's where the Stoic training kicks in. You feel the ache, but you don't interpret it as a cosmic error. You recognize this, too, is nature. This, too, belongs. Seneca spoke to a mother whose son had died. Instead of offering false comfort, he told her gently, "What you have lost was mortal. What you have lost was never truly yours. You knew this day would come. You just did not know when." That sounds harsh until you realize what it frees you from. It frees you from pretending. It frees you from screaming at the rain to stop. It frees you from the illusion that clinging harder prevents change. You begin to live differently. You say, "I love this person," knowing they will go. You say, "I enjoy this season," knowing it will end. You say, "I accept this gift," knowing I can't keep it forever. And in doing that, your love becomes more vivid. Not because you control it, but because you don't. There's a line from Epictetus, spoken like a whisper. When you kiss your child, say softly to yourself, "Tomorrow, they may die." Not to frighten you, to deepen your presence, to remind you that nothing is guaranteed. Your ego says, hold tighter. Stoicism says, hold truer. Hold people with awareness, not possession. Hold titles with gratitude, not identity. Hold life with open hands, not clenched fists. And when loss arrives, because it will, you don't collapse. You bow. You say, "Thank you for what was. I release what is no longer mine." You begin to see that even grief has a place, not as a punishment, but as a reset. It reminds you what matters. It cleans out illusions. It returns you to yourself. And from the bird's eye view, this isn't failure. It's movement. It's continuity. It's nature unfolding, as it always has. You start to recognize the deeper gift. Everything you've lost prepared you to love better, not worse, to appreciate more fiercely, to live less wastefully. Because when you know things can vanish, you stop sleepwalking. You return to your work, your family, your quiet mornings, not with entitlement, but with reverence. And that, too, is a kind of gain. The ego sees only subtraction, but you now see refinement. And in that space, you feel something ancient settle in your chest. Not numbness, not detachment, peace. You want more, a little more money, a little more praise, a little more clarity, freedom, security. The ego tells you it's just a little, just enough to feel stable, just enough to finally relax. But the closer you get, the further the goal moves. Desire always promises satisfaction, but never delivers peace. That's the trap. You think the next thing, the next win, the next purchase, the next acknowledgement will complete the picture, but the picture changes, the edges grow, and from above, you see the pattern for what it is. Craving is a treadmill. It exhausts, but never arrives. The Stoics were not anti-pleasure, they were anti-dependence. They didn't teach you to fear having things. They taught you to fear needing them. And they taught, again and again, that the ego thrives on need. Musonius Rufus, the quiet force among Stoic teachers, told his students that simplicity wasn't just virtue, it was freedom. The one who needs little is the one who can't be owned. And you felt it, haven't you? That brief euphoria after a purchase. That moment when a compliment lifts you. That relief when something arrives you've been chasing. Then, minutes later, hours maybe, the desire shifts. Satisfaction becomes your baseline, and the new craving begins. Zoom out. You're not chasing needs. You're chasing the feeling of being enough. And the tragedy is, that feeling was never for sale. It was always available right here, in the moment you paused wanting. That's the paradox the Stoics understood. Abundance isn't found in accumulation, it's found in sufficiency. In the sentence, I have enough. You begin to see it now, that the people who have the most aren't always the most at peace. Often, they're surrounded by clutter, physical, emotional, mental. Their time is bought by maintenance. Their peace is pierced by the anxiety of losing what they've stacked. And from the bird's eye view, it all starts to look excessive. A storage unit of status, a museum of imagined needs. Desire feels urgent, but often it's a signal, not for action, but for reflection. When you catch yourself craving, ask, where is this coming from? What emptiness am I trying to fill? What story am I believing about what I lack? You'll find that the ego speaks in deficits. I need more to feel safe. I need more to be taken seriously. I need more to be worthy. But that's not truth. That's fear in disguise. The truth is, you're already equipped to live with strength, clarity, and virtue. Right now, without the upgrade, without the extra follower, without the new role or shiny affirmation. And the more you remember that, the less easily you're baited. You start to rewire your taste. You begin to enjoy simpler things more deeply. Not because they're all you can afford, but because they nourish you better. A quiet meal, an honest conversation, an early morning with nothing scheduled. These things don't stroke your ego, but they strengthen yourself. Seneca wrote, "It is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the one who craves more." That sentence cuts deep. It doesn't shame you, it frees you. It says, you are not broken for wanting, but you are mistaken if you believe wanting will heal you. So you begin to declutter, not just your closet, but your mind. You let go of imagined futures that don't align with your values. You stop saying yes out of fear of missing out. You start saying no from a place of centeredness, and desire, though still present, loses its grip. You might still strive, you might still build, but not to prove something, not to be someone, just to express your values, to contribute meaningfully, to participate in the world without being devoured by it. And when someone else flashes their wealth or their success, you no longer feel threatened. Because you're not measuring, you're not keeping score, you're keeping stillness. From above, your life looks lighter now, less rushed, less crowded. And when something good happens, when the raise comes, when the project lands, you receive it with gratitude, not attachment. You enjoy without clinging. You let go without panic. Because you already had enough, and now you live like it. You're standing still now, not frozen, steady, not checked out, awake. Something inside you has shifted, not dramatically, not loudly, but permanently. It's the moment your ego loosens its grip and your field of view opens. You've been looking from a higher place, and the world didn't collapse. You weren't crushed by humility. You weren't erased by detachment. You became real, clear, lighter. This is the view the Stoics work toward. Not a physical elevation, but a perspective shift. A kind of vision that sees through ego, beneath emotion, beyond status. A vision that starts from stillness and moves through the world with grace. It doesn't mean you won't feel pain. You will. It doesn't mean your emotions go silent. They won't. But it means your ego no longer runs the show. You are no longer pulled by cravings or pushed by fears. You are no longer reactive to what others think. You are no longer enslaved by the need to be seen, remembered, praised, or right. You have begun to walk differently through the same streets, same conversations, same challenges, but with less friction, less tension, fewer illusions. Marcus Aurelius captured this feeling near the end of his meditations. He reminded himself, "Go to your inner citadel. There, no harm can touch you. There, no crowd can distort you. There, you are free." And you found it, not a fortress, but a clearing. That freedom was never outside you. It was always there, obscured by ego, uncovered by attention. You now see every moment as an opportunity to practice, not performance, but alignment. When someone offends you, you breathe. When things go wrong, you adjust. When success arrives, you nod without clinging. You've become difficult to offend, not because you're hardened, but because you're rooted. You've become harder to flatter, not because you're arrogant, but because you're anchored. The bird's eye view doesn't make you passive. It makes you responsive. Your vision is wide, but your action is precise. You no longer waste energy on things you can't control. You no longer confuse appearance with reality. You act from clarity, not ego. This doesn't make you better than others. It makes you more in tune with your nature. You begin to feel a quiet sense of duty, not because someone demands it, but because something in you has matured. Something that says, if I've seen clearly, I must live clearly. Your conversations shift. You listen more. You speak less to impress, more to understand. You ask deeper questions. You care more about someone's character than their title. You smile more easily. You notice beauty in small places. And when trouble arrives, as it always will, you no longer say, "Why me?" You say, "Ah, this too. Let me meet it well." That's the voice of someone who has practiced, someone who no longer takes everything personally, someone who knows that the world isn't plotting for or against them. It's just unfolding. You stop trying to control it all. You start dancing with it. The Stoics never promised happiness. They promised clarity, peace, integrity. And you've touched those things now, not as theories, but as daily tools. You know now that your ego cannot survive this view. It's too open, too honest, too spacious. But you can survive it. In fact, this is how you begin to really live. From above, your life isn't small. It's part of something connected, not starring, but contributing, not grasping, but giving. You've stopped needing the world to validate you. You've begun to validate yourself by how you carry yourself through it. So when the next success comes, you say, "Thank you." And when the next setback comes, you say, "Thank you." You've accepted the terms of reality. And from that acceptance comes calm, not stillness of motion, but stillness of soul. The kind that notices, responds, endures, and then smiles quietly, because the work is never done, but it's always worth doing. You are not the same person who started this journey, not because you've added something, but because you've removed a layer, the layer that kept your view narrow, noisy, and reactive. That layer was your ego. And now, from the higher ground, you see it for what it was, a defense mechanism, a mask, a noisemaker that drowned out the wiser voice inside you. You won't always stay in this state, The world will tug at you again. Old patterns will whisper. Cravings will return. But now, you know how to return to this view. The view where your story is part of something bigger. The view where your feelings are information, not commands. The view where praise and blame weigh the same. The view where control is traded for clarity. And in that clarity, there is rest. Not the kind that comes from escape, but the kind that comes from alignment. You can breathe now. You can step forward with less armor. You can begin to live, not to impress, not to win, not to perform, but simply to contribute, to do good work, to show up as a human among humans. And maybe that's all the Stoics ever asked of you. Not to be special, but to be whole,